Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast, where I'm on a mission to help you get the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you. Well, tonight I'm going to share with you some big changes that are underway in my People Box. What's a People Box, you may ask? Well, a People Box is not officially or even standardly a part of a Zettelkasten. A People Box is something that I learned from Scott Shepper. He used to keep one, and in one of his earliest videos, he talks about his People Box, but then it disappeared from his channel, and I didn't hear any mention of it again. Well, I went happily along with mine, and it was primarily, I called it my author box, but then it did get added to it some of my personal contacts, and even things like the appointment date to change the furnace filters ended up in the People Box. So it got to be kind of a mixture of home management, personal contacts, and authors. Well, I could live with that because you're going to an alphabet and you're going to look up what you're looking for. But I did find that over time, I really wished that I had an index of the titles of my books. If I could remember the title or a word or two of the title and couldn't remember the author, it was darn hard for me to find the bib cards, because my bib cards by my naming convention are the initials of the author, then an underscore, and then initials of the keywords of the title. So it became a lot of hunt and peck, and I decided it was time to make a change. I ended up making quite a sweeping change, and in this process, I'm going to be filtering out my true cards that relate to books, videos, and other source materials from my cards that have to do with my personal life, friends, family, appointments, etc. So I will show you over in the down-facing camera the new format that I'm using for my People Box, but I think it's going to end up being called something different. The book box, the author box, the sources box. Maybe you can help me figure out the best name for it. I'm not all the greatest at coming up with names for things, but boy, oh boy, I'm sure liking the way it's starting to fall together. So come on over, I'll show you what I've got, and I'll work a couple of cards with you to show how it functions. See you over there. Okay, here's the drawer that contains my index and my author box or People Box, however you want to call it. And these two tabs right here marking the new cards that I'm beginning to add to eventually replace this section, or at least divide the section up into cards that I'm going to be transferring to my sources box, People Box, however you want to call it, and those that I'll leave behind in the general alphabetical index. So let me show you as an example what a card looks like, and we'll take a couple of the old style bib cards and put them in the new style so you can see how this functions. Right now, with these two new cards that I'm about to add, that will complete the letter A for me as far as sources. And what remains in the letter A are things that are not sources. So you can see it's actually being pretty well taken over and in the management of my personal life is actually kind of maybe even slightly larger than the number of actual sources. They look pretty much the same, especially by the time I add two more. So they're about the same thickness. So I would say about 50-50 of this space, if the A's are any indication, the rest of them are 50-50 personal life versus actual sources. So let's take a look at putting two new cards into this so we can see how this functions. Okay, the format of the new style of author box is based on the same style as the general index. I'm just starting out with the letter A and 1 to indicate that it's the first card. Then it goes on to B, C, and so on. I'm creating the cards as I get one. So for example, I don't have anything with a D yet. So as soon as a D comes along, I'll create a card for the D. And because I don't have a whole lot yet, I do not yet have a dividers separating them. Although I do have some dividers on order, and I will eventually give them their own separate alphabetical dividers. So perhaps we can see a little bit about how this works from the first entry. This first entry is the book, Christopher Alexander's book, Timeless Way of Building. Per my normal naming convention, although not everything in my author box follows my current naming convention, but this one is a recent one, and it does. I've got R.ca for Christopher Alexander, an underscore, and then TWB for Timeless Way of Building. So now I've indexed this under Alexander, Christopher Alexander. I've indexed this under C for Christopher. I've indexed it under T for timeless, the timeless way of building. I've indexed it under W for timeless way of building. And I've indexed it under B for timeless way of building. Now I'm ready to replace this card, Mortimer Adler, How to Read a Book. And I can identify how I'm going to index it because I'll index it under Adler, Mortimer, How, Read, Book. A for Adler will go first. Now the interesting thing here is that this book is when the transition took place, and I have some cards under R.HRB, but far more of my cards on this book are under MA underscore HRB. So that's what I'm going to put in my index. So there's my A entry. Now I'm going to go back and pick up Mortimer. Okay, I've got the first name, Mortimer Adler, How to Read a Book. Now it's time for me to index each of the keywords in the title. Well, my current index as it stands goes all the way from E to K, so I don't have an H yet. So now I've got my new H card for the how and how to read a book. When it comes to read, I've got the same situation. Currently I have a card for M and one for S, but none for R yet, so I'll make that. Okay, now I've got my card for read. One more to index. Okay, now I've completely indexed this book. I've got all of the card entries needed for Mortimer Adler, How to Read a Book. This card, I'm essentially done with it. I can put it in the recycle bin, or what I'd like to do, as you've probably seen, I like to turn cards that are no longer of value into little packets that are spacers in my drawers. Now, as my drawers fill up, I'm getting more of these freed up. So I've got more than I need right now, but still I like to create them because sooner or later I'll have to get another pair of drawers and I'll be back to needing a bunch of these again. Okay. Now this card is going to be a lot of fun to process. You'll notice these were all done in the old style. I do not have TA underscore. They're just the titles of the book. It still works. I'll use this card number because I don't have any bib cards in my system that talk to anything other than these names, so they're going to stick around. But there's 3 different titles that are going to have to be indexed. I'll be indexing under Thomas Aquinas, Treatise, Cardinal Virtues, Cardinal Virtue of Temperance, and Summa Theologiae. So I've got a lot of indexing to do for Thomas Aquinas, but when I'm done, I've converted my entire letter A alphabet over to the new system, and the only ones that remain in there will be the ones that relate to my personal life rather than my reading and research. Now, it might be interesting to note I'm already going to be having Thomas Aquinas is going to automatically appear 3 times because when I index it, it's going to be indexed under Thomas Aquinas, Treatise on the Cardinal Virtues. Thomas Aquinas, the Cardinal Virtue of Temperance. Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologiae. So I know right away that I'm going to have 3 references, and following my pattern with the index, I'm going to want to use a separate card for the keyword when it's used 3 times, or a separate card for the author when the author appears 3 times. So here's my Thomas card with all 3 entries, so St. Thomas Aquinas in the 3 titles. As I look at these titles, I can see that it's not sparing me any T entries because I have a T for treatise, a T for temperance, and a T for theology. This card is actually going to still show up on my general T category because these versions of T are non-overlapping. So here's all my general T entries that I need for treatise, temperance, and theology, but I've got all these T's here for Thomas, so I'm going to treat them just as I would using the index in the regular index box. I'm underlining the whole word because it's on a card of its own, but I'm putting the promotion symbol above the word because there's an unpromoted T on each of these lines. Well, before I could be finished with this card, I would then have to go through and index cardinal, virtues, both of times, and then summa. So I've got a fair amount of indexing left to go. Might as well just finish it out. Let's go with cardinal. And here we are complete with the letter C with the 2 uses of cardinal. One more use of cardinal and it will get a card of its own. Well, we're on to mapping virtues, but we don't have a letter V yet. That can be repaired. And so we've launched our V card with 2 entries for virtue, tucked it away where it goes, and we only have 1 letter of the alphabet left to deal with this reference to summa. Okay, and here's the last one. And with that, we have a goodly collection of the alphabet already represented in our sources index, authors and sources. Maybe that's what I'll call it, authors and sources. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little side digression into the changes that I'm making to my authors and sources box and how I'm separating it out from what I'm going to continue to call my people box, which is all going to be about my personal life. So I hope that was instructive for you, and I hope you found some good suggestions. If you have something interesting that you do with your Zettelkasten, if you have a different box or a different system that you use for taking care of your looking up your books and your authors, I'd love to see it. And other than that, I will talk to you again later. Bye-bye.